Hey everybody, my name is Will Bronick, and welcome to the first episode of Speak of the Devil, a sports talk show slash podcast, whatever you want to call it, that I hope to launch on this channel. Now, we have quite a bit to talk about. So let's start off with the NHL, with the Buffalo Sabres finally, and I mean finally, firing Ralph Krueger. Now, I'm not even a Sabres fan, but this is a team I feel like that has been struggling for a long time, maybe even long enough. Now, I actually saw a power ranking somewhere floating around the internet, um, and it is has all 32 teams. Yes, all 32, and it actually placed Buffalo below the Seattle Kraken. Now, it's bad enough to be at the bottom of the league currently, but to be below a team that A, hasn't even selected their coaches, management, and players yet, but also hasn't even played a game, you know that's where rock bottom is. Basically, there is no rock bottom for the Sabres, it seems like. And this is a team that has been loaded. You had guys like Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall. You added him. You paid a lot of money for Jeff Skinner. They only gave you, what, 4 goals? And you paid them a total of $27 million? What the heck, Buffalo? What were you thinking? Now, this honestly should have been done a long time ago. I kind of understand the suffering, because I'm a Devils fan. But seeing as how when the Devils beat the Sabres last night, yes, I was happy that the Devils won. But at this point, it was just kind of sad. Like, I want to see Buffalo succeed for once. Because I don't remember the last time they were in the playoffs. I think it's been 10 years. It's going to be 11 if this keeps up. Now, I will say it's probably too late to make a turnaround like the St. Louis Blues did 2 years ago. Now, here's something that I've learned that's pretty interesting. So this was on a radio broadcast for Buffalo Sports. And apparently, the players got away with being offsides and for making bad passes. I mean, if you were a coach and you saw your players either going offsides or making one small mistake, would you let that slide? Probably not. Like, if that was my team, if I was on a hockey team and we did one thing wrong, we'd have to do it all over again. But Sabres did what they should have done a long time ago. However, I feel like Ralph Krueger wasn't the only problem. I feel like it's also the ownership. The owners need to, grow up and actually give ownership of the Sabres to people who actually know how hockey works. Now, granted, the Bills are on the right track. You got Josh Allen, you got a great wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. I'd say in terms of football, Buffalo has a bright future. I will give them that. But in terms of hockey, I say they're going to be in the basement for quite a while. And just when it looked like they were going to break out of their never-ending cycle of mediocrity or coming up short, like last year when they introduced a 24-team playoff format, Buffalo ended up being 25th. If that doesn't describe Buffalo sports, I honestly don't know what does. But yeah, glad that the Sabres have finally grown the nerve to, get rid of their coach who went on a 12-game losing streak. Because here's the thing that's kind of interesting. Montreal, they fired Claude Julien after a 5-game losing streak. But yet they're still in contention for a playoff spot. But 11 games wasn't enough for the Sabres. But 12, 12, that was the nail in the coffin. That was the one that had to send Ralph Krueger packing. And the players said they loved working with Ralph Krueger, especially Taylor Hall, but that was because they worked together in Edmonton. And Lindy Ruff, who's the current coach of the Devils, he loved being in Buffalo. This is a guy who puts his heart and soul into coaching. He's actually one of the winningest coaches in NHL history. But if we didn't get Lindy Ruff as a head coach, I feel like he would have, loved to have been given another chance with the Sabres. I know a lot of other YouTubers out there would probably agree with this. But yeah, this is honestly something that should have been done a long, long time ago. So let's talk about NFL free agency. I actually had it pulled up a little bit ago. quite a bit of shocking development, at least in my opinion. It looks like AJ Green, the Bengals wide receiver, is going to Arizona for a 1-year deal. Now, it just seems like that Arizona is trying to build up. They're trying to break out of that terrible cycle they've been in. Because let's see what they got here. They got Kyler Murray, who is on the up and up. He's easily becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. DeAndre Hopkins, great wide receiver. In fact, he and Kyler Murray are becoming quite a duo. Adding J.J. Watt helps it quite a bit. I think that'll improve their defense a lot. Only time will tell. And now adding A.J. Green, that only adds fuel to the machine that is Arizona's offense. But it looks like Arizona wasn't the only team that was busy in terms of free agency. The Patriots were busy signing all these guys. Hunter Henry, I think it was, of the Los Angeles Chargers, and they signed Nelson Aguilar. Now, it looks like both New England and Arizona are trying to be more competitive with Tampa, who have extended Brady and Gronk. Now, there will be a time when we're going to be asking, what will happen when Brady and Gronk finally call it a career, or when Gronk calls it a career again, this time for good. We'll get to that point when it comes. But it seems like overall Tampa has a better team because they've meshed really well together. Because you make all these splashes because you've been adding guys like, Brady. Besides Brady and Gronk, you've added guys like Ndamukong Suh, Leonard Fournette, and in the middle of the season, you signed Antonio Brown. And not only that, you guys won a Super Bowl in your own stadium. Now, that is very impressive. And Buccaneers, I'm a little worried about them, and not in a bad way. It's just that they're one of those teams that make me think, are they going to have a dynasty? And chances are they probably will. The Colts signed Marlon Mack to a 1-year extension worth $2 million. Now, Marlon Mack, I feel like, is pretty underrated. In fact, I would say the Colts have a lot of underrated players. And they're finishing up a deal to acquire Carson Wentz from the Philadelphia Eagles, according to Adam Schefter. Now, Phillip Rivers, he called it a career. Would I say Carson Wentz is a bit of an upgrade? Honestly, not really. I mean, I guess in terms of stats-wise, Carson Wentz is a tiny bit better, but he gets injured way too much. I'd say the Colts are looking towards a long rebuild here. Let's see, what else have we got here? No news on Deshaun yet, and looks like he might stay. And it looks like the draft or the trade value for Sam Darnold of the New York Jets is unfortunately dropping. So the Jets have a lot to work with. I mean, there's been a little bit of talk. There was a really weird article I found somewhere that they're about like what would happen if the Jets were to acquire Russell Wilson in a 4-team trade. One of my friends sent me that article, as well as my dad sent it to my sister and I. But it would just make no sense. I mean, I'm pretty sure Russell Wilson is content in Seattle. I mean, he brought them to 2 Super Bowls. One of them was a huge win over Peyton Manning and the Broncos. But yeah, this just doesn't add up. You have a lot to work with. Do you draft Justin Fields from Ohio State? Do you draft Zach Wilson from Brigham Young? Because it obviously looks like Trevor Lawrence is going to go to the Jaguars with Urban Meyer, which I honestly think would be a good fit. It would be nice to see the Jaguars do something big. But overall, I just say that the Jets have a lot to work with. They messed around too much in trying to land Deshaun Watson, what they want to offer up. And now their window is all but closed, and now they have to scramble and try to find more pieces to add to their depth. Now, granted, they added wide receiver Corey Davis, and they added a defensive lineman. I think he was from the Bengals. But yeah, Jets, they have a lot to figure out. And hopefully they can figure something out. All right, now we're going on to the NBA. Anthony Davis still isn't healthy. In fact, I don't know if he'll be healthy. This is a guy who's probably midway through his prime right now. And you can't have LeBron carry the whole team. No disrespect to LeBron. He's arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time. If not, well, whether or not he's the greatest, we can say that for another time. But it's starting to look more and more like the Nets are the obvious favorite to win. And while it would be nice for the Nets to pay their dues and finally win the big one, it just wouldn't feel right. Now, the reason I say it is because back in 2019, who would have thought that a Nets team with guys like D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, Jared Dudley, Jared Allen, all of these young guys not alone make it to the playoffs for the first time in 5 years, but also land two of the biggest stars in the entire league in that same year. And not only that, they gave up a boatload of draft picks. We all know this in exchange for James Harden. And so far, it looks like he's doing pretty well. The team is meshing really well. And not only that wasn't the only bombshell that Brooklyn added. They also announced, Blake Griffin announced that he was going to go to the Nets for the remainder of the season. I found this thing on Facebook where JaVale McGee was looking into some top contenders, and one of them was Brooklyn. Now, not that it wouldn't be a terrible addition, because let's be real, the Nets defense is horrendous. While yes, you have arguably the best offense in the league, you're going to need some high-quality defense. And you had it in Jared Allen, but guess what? He's now with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Not only that, but Spencer Dinwiddie is still out. He's out for pretty much the whole season. But adding JaVale McGee would really help, because if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think DeAndre Jordan is really good enough to be a key defender. Now, if you want somebody like Jeff Green, that's a possibility, because he's been doing pretty well defensively. And Kevin Durant, he's playing like he's never been hurt. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the Brooklyn Nets. Sorry, I'm going on a little rant about them, kind of like what I did with the Sabres. I do want to talk about, the standings. Much to my surprise, I think much to everybody's surprise, is that the New York Knicks are actually doing pretty well. They are 7th, I think, 7th or 6th in the Eastern Conference, and not too far behind them are the Charlotte Hornets. Now, this was a team that went from giving away their best player, probably ever, in exchange for Terry Rozier. Now, that is really interesting. And now they have LaMelo Ball, who is probably going to be your Rookie of the Year if he keeps up this pace, as well as some other young guys like Miles Bridges and Devontae Graham. Honestly, I think if this keeps up, we could see the Hornets in the playoffs for the first time. Last time they were in, I think it was 2016. But it would be nice to see the Hornets finally make it, especially since they have a great young core that seems to be continuing to develop. And let's see. No, I think the last thing we can do is discuss March Madness. I actually have my bracket right here that I wanted to discuss with you guys. Oh, everything's becoming a mess. Oh, hold on. All right, so I have all the regions right here. The West, East, Midwest, and South. Now, this is the first time in 2 years that we're actually having a March Madness due to obvious reasons. So I'm going to go through each of them, and I'm going to quickly go through my picks, and I'm going to go through the whole tournament on who I think will end up winning the national title. First up, we have Gonzaga against Norfolk State or Appalachian State. Pretty obvious. I'm going to go with Gonzaga. They are a pretty explosive team. I think they can make a deep run here. Oklahoma, Missouri. I'm going with Oklahoma. Crane and USBC. I think this is an interesting one because in terms of points wise, UCSB. I am so sorry for butchering that name. They are in terms of points. They seem to be doing better than Crane. And it seems like in terms of a few other stats, they seem to be better. And for that reason, I'm going to pick UCSB to upset the Blue Jays. All right, next up, Virginia and Ohio State. Virginia, the defending national champions. This is going to be a little bit difficult. I kind of struggled with this one, in all honesty, because there was a long debate whether or not Virginia was even going to make it to the NCAA tournament due to COVID. We don't know if all their players are going to be 100% healthy, and chances are they could be a little bit rusty too. I think they're going to struggle with Ohio, but in the end, Tony Bennett and his squad are going to pull off the win. Next up, we have the USC Trojans going up against either Wichita State or Drake. I think this is going to be a pretty simple one. I'm going to pick USC. Next up, we have Kansas and Eastern Washington. This is another one where, in stats-wise, the lower seed is going above the upper seed. And just like Virginia, I feel like Kansas is going to be a little bit off this year. So I'm going to pick Eastern Washington for the upset. Next up, we're going to have Oregon versus VCU. I think Oregon will win this one. As for Iowa and Grand Canyon University, I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. Next up, we have Michigan going up against Texas Southern. MSM. I'm very sorry. I'm going to go with the Wolverines in this one. I think they have a possibility of making a deep run. In fact, I have them going to the Elite Eight. Next up, LSU and Saint Bonaventure. I think this will be a highly contested matchup. I think it'll be very close, very high scoring. But I think in the end, LSU is going to pull off the win. Next up, Colorado and Georgetown. I'm going to have Georgetown pulling off the upset. I think overall they are a better team in terms of offense, because they gave Creighton quite a scare in the finals in the Big East tournament. Next up, we have Florida State and UNC Greensboro. This one was a little bit tough, because in terms of stats, they're really not that far off from each other. But in the end, I'm going to go with Florida State to go with a safe pick. I'll save most of the upsets for a little bit later. Next up, BYU against either Michigan State or UCLA. I'm going to have BYU win. I think they're a very underrated team, and I think they can do quite a bit of damage in this tournament. But only one way to find out. Next up, Texas versus Abilene Christian University. I think Texas is probably one of the most underrated teams in this tournament. They got a lot of weapons in their disposal. And I think they're actually going to pull off this win and make a deep run. Next up, UConn and Maryland. Now, I'm personally am a UConn fan. And while it was great to see UConn finally make it to the NCAA tournament, because normally it's the women that make it to the tournament, it's great to see the men have their turn as well. I'm going to think UConn pulls off the win, but I don't think they're ready to make that next step quite yet. Dan Hurley's still a little bit new, and I think they still have quite a bit of young guys on their team. Next up, we have Alabama and Iona. I think this is kind of a no-brainer. I'm going to go with Alabama. I think they're also a very underrated program, because who would have thought they would be in the top 10 at the end of this year? And I'm actually going to have them go to the Sweet 16. Yeah, I kind of gave away my next pick. Next up, for the South, we have Baylor versus Hartford. Now, I have a friend who's a big University of Hartford fan. In fact, he's also a big UConn fan. Sorry, my friend, but I'm going to have to pick Baylor in this one. I think overall Baylor has probably the better team out of anybody in this tournament. Maybe even the South bracket alone. Next up, North Carolina and Wisconsin. I feel like North Carolina is also going to be off throughout this tournament. And the seeding might not, it might not be much of an upset, but I'm going to pick the Badgers to win this one. Next up, Villanova and Winthrop. This is going to be interesting. We have a team that is known to be pretty dominant against a up-and-coming team that was supposed to have their turn last year, but ended up getting kind of screwed over due to obvious reasons. And I think it's going to be redemption time for Winthrop. I'm going to have them upsetting Villanova in this one. Next up, Purdue versus North Texas. I'm going to pick Purdue in this one. Next up, Texas Tech and Utah State. I think Utah State is a really good program. I think they got a good team ahead of them. They're explosive. I think they're pretty fun to watch. For that reason, I have them taking Texas Tech. Next up, Arkansas versus Colgate. Now, Arkansas, from my understanding, has one of the top 5 prospects to enter this year's NBA draft. Now, I think that'll be huge for them, but in the end, I'm actually going to pick Colgate to pull off the upset. Like I said, I was going to save the upsets for a little bit later. Next up, we have Florida versus Virginia Tech. I'm going to go with the safe one. I'm going to go with Florida. As for Ohio State and Oral Roberts, I'm going to go with the Buckeyes. All right, next up, we have Illinois versus Drexel. I think Illinois is one of those teams that can match Baylor in terms of, overall team in terms of offense, defense, and team chemistry. I think they'll make it to the next round. Loyola Chicago and Georgia Tech. I'm going to pick Loyola Chicago. They were one of my favorite stories from I think it was 2018. It was, yeah. But I think this is as far as they're going to go. Tennessee and Oregon State. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think they've got a solid program ahead of them. Oklahoma State and Liberty. For those that know, my friend TJ was on this channel a couple of times, and he actually has a sports talk show at Liberty. TJ, my friend, I am very sorry, but I have to go with Oklahoma State in this one, because not only are they the overall better team, but they have another prospect who's supposed to be a top 5 in the NBA draft this year. Next up, San Diego State and Syracuse. I'm actually going to go with the Aztecs in this one. Next up, West Virginia and Morehead State. I'm going to go with the Mountaineers. Clemson and Rutgers. This seems to be a relatively close game. I think both teams will be very well prepared, but I think Clemson will pull off the win. Next up, Houston and Cleveland State. I'm going to go with Houston. And now for the round of 32. I'm going to have Gonzaga beating Oklahoma. I'm going to have Virginia beating UCSB. I'm going to have the Trojans of USC beating Eastern Washington. Iowa beating Oregon. Michigan beating LSU. Florida State beating Georgetown. Texas beating Brigham Young. Alabama versus beating UConn. Baylor beating Purdue. Ohio State beating Utah State. Illinois beating Oklahoma State. And Houston beating San Diego State. All right, Sweet 16. This is the fun part. All right, Zaga and Virginia. I'm going to have Gonzaga winning this one. USC and Iowa. I have Iowa. Michigan and Florida State. I'm going to go with Michigan. Texas and Alabama. This is where my bold prediction comes in. I say Texas wins this one. Baylor and Ohio State. Baylor and Ohio State. I'm going to go with Baylor. Sorry for the pause there. And Illinois and Houston. I'm going to go with Houston. All right, now for the Final Four. Gonzaga and Texas. Oh, no, Elite Eight. Sorry, I'm completely messed up. Elite Eight. Still have to go through that. Gonzaga and Iowa. I'm going to go with Gonzaga. Michigan and then Texas. Sorry, Texas, but but you're going to keep going in this one. I'm going to have them pull off the upset. Baylor and Ohio State. Baylor. And Illinois and Houston. Illinois. All right, now we're doing the Final Four. I apologize again. Zaga and Texas. I'm going to go with Gonzaga. And for Baylor and Illinois, I'm going to go with Illinois. So it will be Gonzaga and Baylor in my picks for the national championship. And for my national champion, Baylor. So that is about it for my bracket. You can see I messed up on Virginia a little bit. I wanted to go with Ohio, but in the end I chose Virginia. So if you enjoy me rambling on for 25 minutes, then be sure to give this a big thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe for more content. Next week, I promise there will be more content to deliver. And hopefully this becomes a big success. Alright, so until next time, see you later everybody, and I'll see you at the next movie review.